Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm doing a very special video. That's right, 2 days in a row of horror movie reviews. What kind of Franken-science is this that gives us this much quality content? Well, there's a reason for it. It's election day. So I literally Googled horror movie about voting, and what I came up with was the 2015 movie 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺. So in keeping with today's theme, I do want to just take this moment to plead with you. It is election day. This is the day to vote in person. It is the last day to vote for the 2022 United States midterm elections, and your voice needs to be heard. It does matter. Apathy is not an option. There's too much at stake. This is important. Please look up the plan, look up your polling place, and go vote. I will make this statement until I'm blue in the face. Okay, so 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺 2015, written and directed by Aaron Han and Mario Miskiel, and this is a movie that kind of reminded me a little bit of 𝗘𝗾, in that we have a series of strangers that are kind of randomly just woken up in an odd room with no recollection of how they got there. Only instead of a cube, it's a circle. And instead of just a handful of folks, it's 50 of them. Surrounded by nothing but darkness, they're each standing on their own little individual circle, and if they try to leave that circle and they, step outside of it, there's a little warning, but eventually that warning turns into zap, you're dead. If they touch their neighbor, it's a little warning until it's not, and then zap, you're dead. So you may be wondering at this point, how is this a horror movie about voting? Well, there's a countdown. Every couple of minutes, there's a final countdown. Sorry, couldn't help but play the song in my head. Just kind of happened there. There's a countdown, and when the countdown is over, whoever is selected by the most number of votes zaps and dies. It has to do with a series of red triangles on the floor, and they figure out how to manipulate it into a selection, and only an individual can know their own selection. Anybody else can't see who is picking who, but just generally have to take them at their word and trust them, and eventually whoever has the majority of votes zaps and dies. It goes on with some rules from there, such as if nobody votes, then the person that dies is randomly selected, but nevertheless, somebody dies. As well as if there's a tie, then the people involved in the tie get lit up nice and bright for a secondary round of voting, and if there remains a tie, then, well, everybody that's lit up zaps and dies. So that's pretty much the core mechanic of what's going on here. And the horror movie aspect of this, beyond just the absolute terror of waking up in this odd situation, Machiavellian game, is born from the societal, cultural, worst of humanity elements that arise as a natural result of this, with people wanting to pick off the elderly first, or, basically trying to assign who has so much value as a human being that they could be selected without too much guilt. And as things start to go on, more game theory really starts to take effect, with knowing that there's a little child and a pregnant woman there, figuring that they would be held off to last just because nobody wants to select them, realizing that they are at that point, if it's only one person standing, are a threat eventually down the road, so maybe it's worth taking them out nice and early. A lot of theory and a lot of unfounded supposition to try and figure out what's going on and the best way for any individual person of that 50 to be alive at the end of all this. And it brings up a lot of interesting things, and I think that one of the things I liked about the circle was the fact that it is a good little thought experiment. For instance, you could be looking at somebody and then try to make the case, well, this person here is of low moral fiber, and so on and so forth. But, if you overstate your case, if you're really a bit of an asshole about it, then you could wind up in the target of everybody else making their own little silent selections. You kind of have to balance things a little bit between trying to get people on your side and get them to do this, while at the same time not making yourself a villain, and some people do that with a varying degree of success, let's just say. I think that 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺 works fairly well, again, like I said, as a thought experiment and as a concept. As a film, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it all the way from beginning credits to end credits. I really did. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that there is a certain portion of it, a big portion of it, in fact, that does start to get a bit redundant. Everything that you kind of see in the first half is largely present in the second half. So, it kind of just turns into a bunch of people arguing, making their case. This is a lot of talking. This is huge amount of talking. By its very nature, there's no real action taking place. It's 50 people standing in place for an hour and a half talking. But it can still be fairly dynamic in that with how much it really kind of plays with things. And of course, this deals with a lot of cultural elements, some ham-fisted, some with a little bit of nuance, and all of it, okay-ish. We wind up with some racists, we wind up with some bigots, we wind up with some homophobic folks, we wind up with some just general assholes, and all of that kind of comes to play. So this is essentially almost turning into a snapshot microcosm of humanity, trying to, again, decide how much worth any one individual human being has over another, which is inherently problematic. But when you have the clock counting down, forcing people to make a selection, and you want to be the last person standing, people going to make their case, and sometimes they're not going to show the best side of themselves in doing so. It kind of stands to reason. I would be really interested to see a sociology or a psychology major, kind of tackle this. I think that would be a really interesting conversation to have as far as how realistic a lot of this would really play out, how much of a snapshot of America or the world even that this is, and how well these characters really kind of show their humanity against the nature of what was going on here. I think one of the major complaints that I really had about this movie is, aside from that level of arguing and that level of humanity exposing itself and showing some of the nastier sides of itself, there's really not a whole lot here. As far as kind of a narrative of the folks figuring out what's going on, it kind of tackled that a little bit. There were some folks that kind of tried to do some little bit of investigation, try to get some information out of other folks, but it kind of proved to be an interesting development in that if you are trying to develop parallels and try to find similarities and try to find a pattern to establish who's doing this, why, and how to get out of it, as soon as somebody kind of reveals everything about themselves in an effort to have that contributory piece of that pattern, they've also kind of lost their value in the contribution to their piece of the puzzle. They've exposed themselves, you're done with them. And the clock is ticking. Time to vote for somebody. Even so, I did find this to be an interesting movie. Similarities, again, with Cube, but not nearly on the same level of quality. So I softly recommend it. If you have nothing better to do on a Friday night and nothing else is tickling your fancy, maybe kick it on. It's a fun little flick. But if you're looking for something that kind of goes above and beyond and you want something incredibly thoughtful and something that actually make you feel an emotional resonance and have a life-changing kind of cinematic experience, I'd say that 2015 Circle is worth passing on. So there you go. That's my review of Circle. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Please vote, vote, vote. This is your last day. Take care. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Vote.